Welcome to Law and the Machine, where artificial intelligence meets the legal system, liability, regulation, intellectual property, and the government's uncomfortable role as both rulemaker and AI adopter. The law wasn't written for this.
Imagine getting a layoff notice, not from your manager in a hushed office, but delivered impersonally, perhaps even automatically, and you suspect the decision wasn't truly human at all.
And the company in this scenario then struggles to explain why that decision was made because the mechanism behind it is too complex, too opaque, even for them to fully articulate.
That's the chilling prospect raised by the analysis being discussed today, focusing on reports of Meta allegedly using AI to inform some of its recent layoffs. The title itself, "The Algorithm Will See You Out," paints a pretty vivid picture.
It does. And the core question isn't just if AI was used, but what happens when these powerful, often black box systems are deployed in high-stakes human resource decisions, especially when those decisions result in job losses. The liability black box, as the report puts it, becomes incredibly difficult to navigate.
So, to unpack this, the core claim, as highlighted in the analysis, is that Meta potentially leveraged AI in its layoff process. What does AI-driven layoffs actually mean in this context? Are we talking about a robot walking around handing out pink slips, or something more subtle?
The analysis doesn't suggest a literal robot, but rather the integration of artificial intelligence into the decision-making pipeline. This could involve algorithms analyzing performance metrics, project contributions, team dependencies, or even future skill requirements, then flagging individuals or roles for reduction. Think of it as an automated system identifying efficiencies or redundancies based on vast datasets, rather than a human manager making subjective calls. The report implies that this isn't necessarily about outright firing decisions, but contributing heavily to the list of affected employees.
So it's less about the final act of termination and more about the initial sifting and identification of who might be on the chopping block. And given the scale of Meta's recent layoffs, thousands of employees, the idea of an algorithm having a hand in that feels significant.
Absolutely. The scale is critical. When you're talking about tens of thousands of employees, a completely manual review process becomes incredibly resource-intensive. Companies are always looking for ways to streamline, and AI offers the promise of efficiency and objectivity. But that objectivity can be a double-edged sword, especially when the underlying data or the algorithm's design reflects existing biases. The analysis suggests that the sheer volume of data involved could obscure individual injustices.
Let's discuss the black box problem. This term has been heard in other AI contexts, but what does it mean specifically for employment decisions? And why is it such a significant concern in cases like these alleged Meta layoffs?
The black box refers to the opacity of many advanced AI systems, particularly deep learning models. Their internal workings are so complex, with millions or billions of parameters, that even their creators can't fully trace why a specific input leads to a specific output. In the context of layoffs, it means an algorithm might identify an employee for termination, but when asked why, the system can't provide a human-understandable explanation beyond the model determined this was the optimal outcome.
So it's like a highly complex calculator that gives you an answer, but you can't see the equations it used to get there.
Precisely. And in employment law, transparency and explainability are paramount. If a human makes a decision, they can be asked to justify it, to articulate the reasons. If an algorithm makes the decision and that algorithm is a black box, then the company is left trying to reverse engineer or interpret a rationale that isn't inherently designed for human comprehension. The report points out that this directly clashes with established legal principles.
The implications for accountability here seem enormous. If a company can't explain why someone was laid off, how do they defend against claims of wrongful termination or discrimination?
That's where the liability black box truly becomes an issue. Traditionally, anti-discrimination laws require employees to show that an adverse action was taken against them due to a protected characteristic, like age, race, gender, or disability. The employer then typically has to articulate a legitimate, non-discriminatory reason for the action, With an AI black box, that articulation becomes incredibly difficult, if not impossible, to provide with specificity.
So, if an algorithm, for example, disproportionately identifies older employees for layoffs because their salary history or length of tenure indirectly correlates with some inefficiency metric, but the company can't pinpoint that correlation, how does anyone prove age discrimination?
Exactly. The report emphasizes this challenge. The AI might not be explicitly programmed to discriminate based on age, but if its training data contains historical biases, perhaps older employees were historically assigned to less innovative projects, or their performance reviews were subtly biased, the algorithm can learn and perpetuate those biases. It's a form of disparate impact, where a seemingly neutral policy has a discriminatory effect. But without insight into the algorithm's workings, proving that causal link is extraordinarily difficult for the plaintiff.
So, the burden of proof, which is already significant for employees in discrimination cases, becomes almost insurmountable. The algorithm essentially provides a shield.
It can. The analysis raises the concern that companies might even prefer this opacity, not necessarily with malicious intent, but because it complicates challenges. If you can't prove why the AI made a decision, it's harder to prove discrimination. This creates a regulatory vacuum where existing laws designed for human decision-makers struggle to apply.
Are there any current legal frameworks or precedents that could even begin to address this, or is this entirely new territory here?
This area is largely new territory. Existing anti-discrimination laws like Title VII of the Civil Rights Act or the Age Discrimination in Employment Act were crafted in an era of human decision-making. They focus on intent or demonstrable disparate impact from policies that can be clearly articulated. The report suggests that while these laws can be stretched, they weren't designed for algorithmic opacity. Some jurisdictions are starting to consider algorithmic accountability laws, like in New York City, which has a law requiring audits of AI tools used in employment decisions. But these are piecemeal efforts, and there's no comprehensive federal standard.
So, a company could argue, the algorithm made the choice, not us. It's just math.
And that's precisely the kind of argument that concerns legal scholars and policymakers. The report pushes back on that, asserting that responsibility doesn't evaporate because a tool was used. The company chose to deploy the tool, they chose its training data, and they are ultimately responsible for its outcomes. However, proving that legal chain of responsibility and causation in court remains an immense challenge given the black box nature.
The legal system moves notoriously slowly, and AI development moves at warp speed. It sounds like there's a significant gap between what the technology can do and what the law is prepared to handle.
That's a central tension identified. By the time laws or regulations are even proposed, the technology has often evolved dramatically. And the legislative process is often reactive, responding to harms that have already occurred, rather than proactively setting guardrails. The analysis under review suggests this reactive approach leaves too many individuals vulnerable.
Beyond the legal hurdles for employees, what are the broader ethical implications for companies like Meta using AI in such sensitive areas? Does it erode trust or create a perception of dehumanization in the workplace?
The ethical implications are profound, as the report underscores. Firstly, it fundamentally changes the social contract between employer and employee. If your career trajectory, your job security, can be influenced or determined by an opaque algorithm, it removes the human element of mentorship, empathy, and due process that's traditionally expected, even in difficult situations like layoffs. It certainly risks eroding trust.
This creates a distance between decision makers and the human consequences.
Exactly. And that distance can lead to a desensitization to the impact of these decisions. When an algorithm flags a number, it's easy to forget that number represents a person with a family, bills, and a career. The analysis suggests that deploying AI in this manner could lead to a workforce that feels disempowered and disposable, knowing their fate might rest on an unchallengeable computational process.
So, if companies are implementing these systems, what recourse do employees have, or what should they have, according to the analysis?
The analysis points to the critical need for robust algorithmic auditing. This means not just checking the output, but scrutinizing the training data, the model architecture, and the decision-making logic itself for biases. It also suggests that companies using such systems should be required to provide clear, understandable explanations for AI-driven decisions, even if it requires developing new explainable AI, XAI, techniques to translate algorithmic outputs into human-readable rationales. Without that, the report argues, employees are left without a fair shot at challenging what might be an unfair decision.
This appears to be a massive undertaking, both for companies to implement and for regulators to enforce. Is there any indication that companies are embracing this level of transparency proactively, or is it going to take regulatory pressure?
The analysis suggests that while some companies are certainly investing in ethical AI principles, widespread proactive adoption of deep transparency and explainability for all high-stakes AI applications, especially in HR, is unlikely without significant external pressure. The competitive advantage of efficiency, even with the accompanying opacity, can be a powerful driver. So the impetus will likely come from a combination of public outcry, legal challenges, and eventually regulatory mandates.
To broaden the perspective for a moment, this isn't just about Meta or even just about layoffs. This is about the fundamental shift in who or what makes critical decisions in society, and what happens when that what is a black box.
Precisely. The Meta case, as framed by the analysis, serves as a stark illustration of a much broader problem. Whether it's AI making lending decisions, determining criminal sentencing, or approving medical treatments, the fundamental questions of accountability, transparency, and fairness remain. Employment is just one particularly sensitive area where the human impact is immediate and profound. The report suggests that if these issues are not addressed here, they will proliferate across all sectors.
Let's summarize the key insights from this analysis on Meta's alleged AI-driven layoffs and the liability black box.
First, the deployment of AI in sensitive HR decisions, like layoffs, creates profound accountability challenges, shifting the locus of decision-making away from easily identifiable human actors.
Second, the inherent black box nature of many advanced AI systems undermines traditional anti-discrimination protections, making it incredibly difficult for individuals to prove discriminatory intent or disparate impact.
Third, existing legal frameworks are largely ill-equipped to handle the complexities of algorithmic decision-making, creating significant regulatory gaps that leave employees vulnerable.
And finally, there's an urgent need for clear regulatory standards, mandating algorithmic explainability and robust auditing to ensure fairness and maintain public trust in AI applications, especially in contexts with high human impact.
The questions this analysis raises are significant. Should companies be allowed to deploy AI for such high-stakes decisions like layoffs without full verifiable transparency into their mechanisms?
And perhaps even more critically, what kind of evidence should an individual be required to provide to challenge an AI-driven outcome that they believe is discriminatory or unfair, when the very process is designed to be opaque?
That's all for Law and the Machine. Join us next time as we continue exploring where AI and the law collide. If you found this useful, subscribe. We appreciate it.
The law will catch up, eventually.